Greetings, friends. My name is Pavel Stelmach, and I'm glad to present for you the new episode of Daily Wrap-Up. Let's go. The first topic is the NATO Parliamentary Assembly. It has designated the Russian Federation and its regime as terrorist. The alliance member countries' representatives unanimously supported the resolution. NATO members appeal to set up a special international tribunal to hold this regime accountable for the horrific war crimes systematically committed by the Russian occupation army in Ukraine. As head of the permanent delegation of Ukraine to NATO, Yegor Chernev explained the tribunal will make it possible to convict not only the direct perpetrators of war crimes, but also the top leadership of the Russian Federation. And this resolution is the basis on which the national parliaments of countries will be able to make similar decisions. But the main questions are, when will this resolution change something in the war, and what exactly can it change? Chernev believes that the NATO resolution should ultimately lead to the complete isolation of Russia, both economic and political. However, ordinary Ukrainians only worry that until these restrictions really affect Russia, we will lose even more of our defenders, the homes of our compatriots on the front line. After all, there is much footage on the internet with not a single surviving house left in the entire settlement. But the Ukrainians are ready to withstand this, as well as the cold winter, despite the fact that the Ukrainian energy system was significantly damaged by Russian missile strikes. But people are enduring this, because this is a war not only for Ukraine. We consider it a war for the whole civilized world. Just as in the 16th century the expansion of the Mongol troops of Han Batey stopped on our lands, so we hope that the Russian expansion will end on Ukrainian soil today. As Volodymyr Zelensky noted, Ukrainians don't just believe, Ukrainians know that the strength of our democracy will be a guarantee that no tyranny to the east of us will be able to threaten Europe. But in order to realize all these years, we have to use all the potential of cooperation to stop this terrorist Russian war and restore peace. Let me remind you that yesterday Volodymyr Zelensky also called for support for Ukrainian applications for the membership in the EU and the NATO alliance. After all, Ukraine makes a very important contribution to the protection of the civilized Western community. Ukraine expects to consider our application at the next NATO summit in July in Vilnius, Lithuania. As Olha Stefanishyna, the Deputy Prime Minister for European and Euro-Atlantic integration, noted, Kyiv calls on its partners to show the same courage that the Ukrainian military is currently demonstrating. These days, time flies quickly in Ukraine, and according to Stefanishyna, the Ukrainian people will not tolerate general diplomatic phrases about supporting Ukraine. At the same time, we value and will always value help from partners, especially since NATO itself understands that the support should be there for a long time. As the Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg noted, although support has its price, NATO must be ready to support Ukraine for a long time. Stoltenberg acknowledged that many people in European countries are facing a cost of living crisis, with energy and food bills rising, and it's a difficult time for many people. But the price NATO allies pay is measured in money, while the Ukrainians pay a price measured in blood. If we let Putin win, we will all pay a much higher price. That is why Ukrainians expect further steps from the partners, especially since talks about the ninth package of sanctions against Russia in the EU have already begun. Hopefully they will speed up after the European Parliament's decision to designate Russia as a terrorist country on Wednesday. The second topic is humanitarian crisis in the recently liberated Kherson. Shocking news come from that city. The occupiers used the landfill sites to burn corpses of their fallen soldiers, The Guardian reported. According to local residents, the Russians fenced off the territory, set up roadblock, and did not allow any civilians to enter the place. This was happening on the far side of the landfill. Nowadays, no one is allowed there either, and even people themselves do not dare to go there. There still might be mines and unexploded shells. However, this area can be seen from the windows of the nearby high-rise buildings. Residents said they saw black bags, which are usually used for the bodies of dead people, being taken to the garbage dump, covered with garbage and burned. A column of acid black smoke rose into the air, and there was also a terrible smell. Residents of the city are convinced that this is how the Russians got rid of the corpses of their own soldiers. Because every time the Ukrainian armed forces fired at the Russians, a new batch of packages was brought to the dump. This is done, most likely, so that the family of the dead occupier does not receive a funeral document, after which the aggressor state will have to pay at least some social benefits to his family. However, the Russians destroyed not only bodies, but also the city itself. Retreating, the Russians devastated Kherson and other cities and villages of the right bank of the Dnipro River. Cultural specimens were taken away. Ordinary household property was not spared too. Vital infrastructure was destroyed or mined, thus leaving civilians without electricity, heat, and water. And now, after the retreat, the Russians began shelling the residential areas of Kherson itself, those who were recently declared as citizens of Russia and claimed that they were together forever. As a result of shelling by the Russian occupiers of Kherson, 7 people were wounded and were taken away to the regional hospital. 2 persons died. And these are not the only war crimes that Russians committed against civilian population in Kherson. In the territories where the occupiers used to stand, they left behind traces of crimes. In Kherson alone, prosecutors discovered 4 places where people were tortured. As reported in the Ukrainian Prosecutor General's office, the Russian military made torture chambers in 2 buildings of the Kherson Temporary Detention Center, 1 pre-trial detention center and 1 of the police departments. Parts of rubber batons, a wooden bat and an incandescent lamp were found there. They intimidated people by shooting at them. Bullets were found in the wall. Civilians were also tortured with electric current. Throughout the liberated territory, investigators find the bodies of tortured and shot civilian victims. And this despite the fact that their work is now complicated by mined areas where only the military have access. As for mines, the Russians are quite good at it. The buildings of the National Police of Ukraine and the Security Service were so filled up of explosives that the Ukrainian authorities decided to demolish them and build anew. It will be faster, cheaper and most importantly safer. But not only buildings, but also whole villages demolished in Kherson region. As a result of Russian aggression and hostilities. But as the advisor to the head of the president's office, Mikhailo Podolyak, noted, Kherson itself has disappeared from the Russian media, at least information about the city. Propagandists were ordered to forget the word Kherson. The city and the occupation, which was recently welcomed on the Red Square in Moscow, has now completely ceased to exist in the Kremlin's media. And it is not surprising if the word Kherson has been forgotten today. Tomorrow it will be Donetsk, the day after tomorrow Crimea, and soon whole Ukraine, wrote Mikhailo Podolyak. Looking at the movement of our armed forces, Ukrainians do not just believe, but know that soon our entire territory will be free of the occupiers. As we saw again on the example of the Kherson, with the return of the Ukrainian army and the Ukrainian government, the restoration of the destroyed region begins. Real help is provided to people and those willing are evacuated to other regions. What to talk about if 10 days after the liberation of the city, the Kherson-Kyiv train was already launched? All this again proves that peace, security and well-being are impossible under occupation. Only liberation from Russia and the return of Ukraine guarantees the restoration of normal life. The next topic is the danger at the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. And so far there is no normal life in the occupied territories. Ukrainians are especially concerned about the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant. Not only Ukrainians, but also the whole world. It is not surprising that during the conversation between Volodymyr Zelensky and President of France Emmanuel Macron on Monday, November 21st, the presidents paid special attention to the safety of nuclear power plants. Previously, according to the International Atomic Energy Agency, estimates about 10 explosions occurred near nuclear reactors. And this despite the fact that the Russians do not allow international observers to enter the territory of the station. Referring to the information provided by the management of the power plant, the Atomic Agency reported that the buildings for the storage of radioactive waste, the cooling water system, the cable to one of the reactors, the bridge to the other reactor, and auxiliary buildings were damaged. As long as the damage is not critical to nuclear safety and security, and let's hope that it won't. Because this power plant alone supplied 20% of Ukrainian energy. Imagine how much nuclear fuel there is there, and what consequences its leakage could cause. By the way, the world has long been calling for the creation of a security zone around Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, which means the withdrawal of Russian occupation troops from the territory of the station. Journalists of the Wall Street Journal collected testimonies of employees of the Ukrainian Energoatom about the tension, torture and threats from the Russian occupiers. The Russians tried to take control of the power plant and suppress dissent. The bullying started with the lower technical and repair staff. Since then, they have reached the highest management of the station, including station director Igor Murashov. Captives were beaten with gun butts and batons, shot in the legs and elbows, deprived of food and tortured with electric current. The journalists of the American publication write. According to the Ukrainian company Energoatom, the Russian occupiers detained more than 200 employees. Dozens of them are still considered missing. Most of the detainees were released from captivity within a few weeks if their families paid a bribe or recorded a video message, which was then broadcast on Russian TV channels. Currently, out of 11,000 employees, 3,000 remain at the station. 1,400 of them go to work every day. And these people cause us admiration because, regardless of all the personal danger, they understand that nuclear safety is more important. That concludes today's video. Thank you very much for watching. Stay tuned for further videos. Like and subscribe to UATV English. Goodbye.